It only took me several years to get these gentlemen to commit. Come and join us. He became a good friend over the years. Let me start by his early life. He is from Provo. He was born in Provo. He lived in Utah, California, Great Britain, Washington, and Tunisia. You will know why later. I'm assuming he pursued his education here, mostly in Utah. He got his PhD in education from the University of Utah in 1970. He did study the education changes in the Zaytuna Mosque in Tunis. Zaytuna Mosque is like those facilities that you find mostly in the Middle East in the Middle Age. There are mosques, but around the mosque there is usually a school, comprehensive school that study theology, mathematics, medicine, astrophysics, and stuff like that. So he was there for a couple of years with his wife, for 1 year with his wife and a baby. When he came back, his father, actually, Leno Martin, founded in 1936 well-known company, Utah company, specializing in making garage doors. You know, the garage doors that you open and then they pop out and it slides on top of the roof. That's his father. I think he owned the patent. His father, before dying, he passed the business to his brother, David, who is the uncle of Dr. Keith Martin. And Keith became the director of international sales and helped the company grow from 2 employees to about 200 employees and expand the business over 90 different countries across the globe. So very impressive. For those that work, he received 2 prestigious awards. The first one in 1994, the Presidential E Award for Excellence in Exporting, was given to him by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And the second one in 1996, awarded to him by the World Trade Association's International Person of the Year Award. He has been an adjunct faculty at the University of Utah and the Salt Lake Community College, teaching mostly marketing, international business, marketing related stuff. And then he was selected in 2011. With him, became really strong by the Foreign Ministry of Morocco, Kingdom of Morocco, to become the Honorary Consul of Morocco. This is a big deal because there are only 11 Honorary Consuls of Morocco in the whole United States, and we have one of them here in Utah. After being appointed into that position, he traveled to Morocco several times. He participated in conferences and had some high-level meetings over there. He's married to Teresa. They have 4 boys and 2 girls, and 11 grandchildren. So it's really my privilege and my deep joy to Keith and welcome him officially in our club.
I knew he knew how to say it. Now, the good thing about this Arabic greeting is its deep meaning, which is, may God's peace be with you. The reply is, and may God's peace be upon you. We all know what that means. I want to thank all of you for supporting me for joining the Salt Lake Rotary Chapter 24. Thank you for the great support. You also give Dr. Spey on the Neuro Rehabilitation Center in Marrakesh. And seen it. I hope to go again next time. Many of you have also seen that operation, and it's wonderful what it's doing for those who have had accidents in the Marrakesh area. It's commendable for what to make that happen, as well as all of you. I want to thank Mo for encouraging me, as you heard, to join the Salt Lake Rotary Club, for pinning me, and thanks for being my brother. Hoya, he's my brother. I also want to thank my Uncle David, who is here today. When he was a teenager, he used to ride me on this really neat bicycle. He set a good example. He treated me as a son after Dad died 61 years ago when I was only 10. It's been fun working with David over the years, establishing distributors for Mark doors in 90 different countries, including China, Saudi Arabia, Israel, England, South Africa, Chile. Just keep going. We have Mark doors there. And David has been to all of those. And for sharing, I appreciate also David for sharing with me his pride of Salt Lake Rotary Club 24. I remember when he got picked and all he did and having the Rotary people at his home. And most important of all, thank you, my son Stephen, for the great son and man he is, and for the adventures we've shared in Brazil, the photo adventures we've had in Utah. And hopefully, he will be the next generation of Martins to join the Salt Lake Rotary Club 24. Looking forward to it. In closing, I look forward to making friends with all of you, doing my very best as a Rotarian. Shukran, thank you.
David Robin will introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Richard Best, who is the Regional Director of the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, in the Salt Lake City Regional Office. Before coming to Salt Lake to head up this office, he was Chief Counsel in FINRA's Department of Enforcement in New York. He also serves as Director, Senior Trial Counsel, Attorney, and Trial Attorney at FINRA. Before joining FINRA, he was Assistant District Attorney in the Office of the Bronx County District Attorney, a supervisor in the Rackets Bureau and District Attorney's liaison to the New York Department of Corrections. So you should feel at home with this crowd. He was also an adjunct lecturer at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, earned his undergraduate degree in computer science from State University of New York College of Old Westbury, Howard University School of Law. When he was appointed to this position, the SEC Enforcement Director stated, Richard possesses a wealth of investigative experience, a strong knowledge of industry practices gained from his tenure at FINRA, and excellent trial skills from his impressive career as a prosecutor. That's the official word on Richard. I learned from talking with him that when he was a young prosecutor, his boss came to him one day and said, Richard, I want you to go to an island and interview a potential witness. And he was excited until he said, well, which island? Such was his introduction. So I present to you Richard Best. Thank you.
wonders of technology.
I hope he doesn't prosecute me while I'm standing. Apologize for the delay here. He gets to 135 today.
I'll throw out that I called Mr. Best last month and said I'm a little nervous about conducting a meeting when my top regulator is speaking.
Don't forget.
Why don't you give a few preliminary remarks to work on this?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I would like to thank President-elect Sutherland for inviting me, as well as David Broadbent, and also thank President Saheed for the opportunity to address Club 24. I consider it an honor to come talk to you today, and the areas and the issues that we're going to talk about are really, really very important. I'd like to start with a story. In September of 2015, I've been at the commission for about 3 months. An individual, one of our staff members, walked into my office and said, "Rich, we have a tip." I said, "Okay, this is interesting." And the tip came from an investor who had reached out to a police officer. The investor mentioned an individual by the name of John Scott Clark. I did not know the name, I didn't know who he was. So I looked at my computer, and lo and behold, that individual had been sanctioned by our office in March of 2011. It was a $47 million Ponzi scheme. He was, as part of his settlement, he was ordered to pay back to customers $47 million. Mr. Clark had been charged by the Southern District of New York with money laundering, fraud, and gambling-related charges in 2009. After he finished that sentence and the sentence, he came back to Salt Lake City. He engaged in this impact cash-related fraud, and we sanctioned him. Well, it's now 2015, September, and his name is on my desk. See, what Mr. Clark decided to do was to offer an investment that people could not refuse. The only problem he had was he had to deal with the $47 million judgment. So he said, well, if you help me to address this judgment, I will let you in on the ground floor of a wonderful investment in Iraqi dinar. He has a great scheme on how he was going to help you to make wonderful returns. This was part 2 of the fraud, right? Here's the bigger problem. He was going back to some of the original people from the first fraud. Right? But how did we find out about it? It wasn't a team in Washington that was in a room with a lot of computers and looking at trade data. No, it wasn't that. It was one investor who talked to one police officer and asked questions, and that was it. Let's think about this. The first time it was $47 million. Unfortunately, this time it was $1.7 million, right? But what could it have been if that one investor hadn't asked questions and had reported it? And I think that's the ground from which we start our discussion today. Before I say anything more, though, before I get myself in trouble, I have a small disclaimer for people who've heard the SEC speak before. They may have heard this, so just excuse me. The Securities and Exchange Commission, as a matter of policy, disclaims responsibility for any private publication or statement by any of its employees. That would be me. The views expressed in my discussion today do not necessarily reflect the views of the SEC, its commissioners, or other members of the staff. What that really means is, Rich, you are on your own. So how do we deal with that type of circumstance, that type of fraud? And it's not necessarily, the SEC obviously doesn't just handle the offering fraud cases. We handle a variety of different areas. We obviously have a very robust exam program. Here in Utah, our exam program is operated out of our Denver office. So there's a Denver team that comes in to conduct targeted exams of financial firms in Utah. In fact, in October, we did a week-long outreach to financial firms in the state. The second part of our program is aggressive enforcement. And for me, aggressive enforcement doesn't mean simply seeking the highest penalty and going after every possible individual. For me, aggressive enforcement is proportionate and enforcement that is consistent with justice. Maybe that harkens back to my days as a prosecutor. That's what I think is important. And things like our cooperation program, our whistleblower program, areas that kind of support that. The other area that I think is important is outreach, because at the point that I hear about it, in most instances, that means someone has lost money, right? So if I can get on the front end of that, and I can have people ask the right questions and have access to the right resources, there's the possibility that I may not be as busy. And that is actually my goal. It's not that I don't want to do work, but I want to reduce the amount of cases where I have to call in receivers or bring receivers into cases and people get back sometimes 100% on the dollar, but sometimes significantly less than that, right? So how do we do that? What are some of the things that we can do? And I think that one of the biggest issues that I've seen is that it doesn't matter which audience I speak to. It doesn't matter if I speak to someone who is unsophisticated, has never invested, or I speak to someone who is running a financial institution. There's one common thought. It can't happen to me. Too smart for that. Don't need to ask questions. I trust them. All right? So let's deal with a few of those concepts this afternoon. Okay, my video is not playing, so I'll just, oh, there it is.
Good guy. And all I had to do was ask for the money and pretend I was investing in it. Their life savings and my lifestyle.
Don't let someone else live the life you're saving for. Find out if you're dealing with a registered investment professional and investor.gov is a great first step for
So I thought that video was a really good one to play because, first of all, when I looked at it, it really looked like someplace in Utah. And so when I saw it, I said, I got this one, right? But more importantly, it dealt with a few things. Is the individual says, I can invest your money, it'll be fine, and look at my lifestyle. Look at where I live, look at what I drive, therefore you can trust me. And that is something that I've seen over and over and over again on this concept of trust. And I would say to you, if there's something that you take away from this, it is Mr. Best said, it's okay to trust, but verify. Heard that before. I'll take credit for it. So let's talk about some of the tips we can think about. First is to research the financial product and the financial professional. The next, we'll talk about looking out for red flags, questioning unsolicited offers to invest, being careful when traveling on the new frontier that I call the internet. We recently brought a $200+ million Ponzi scheme case in July that was completely run on the internet and out of a one-bedroom apartment in Murray. The bottom line is ask questions. So let's talk, just look quickly at some of the resources that are available if we want to look at a financial professional. The first one is something called broker check. From my history at the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA runs and operates this database of broker check. So you can go in if you are looking, you're talking to someone who's a broker, and look at their background. What are some of the things that you'll be able to see? You'll be able to look and see whether or not they have customer complaints. What are the customer complaints? Have they been sued? Are they registered? Have they been fired from their employer for something related to their performance or their work? All of these things are quickly available. Now, the question is, if someone's trying to sell you a security, why aren't they registered if they're saying to you that they're affiliated with a brokerage firm? You can ask, because you can go in, go to broker check and take a look. Now, if they're not registered with broker check, another place that they may be found, IPD database, an advisor. And that you can go directly, it's on there, you can go to sec.gov and take a look at whether or not the individual is registered through either broker check or through the IAPD database on sec.gov. And the reason this is important is this is operating as a check and ability for you to know and understand whether or not the person that you're looking at, placing your money, placing your time, your investment dollars, has actually been regulated. As Brett was mentioning when we had the discussion initially, it's important to know that there is a regulator, whether it's FINRA or the SEC, that is, at least for the state, that is conducting some type of review of the person that you are considering placing your investment dollars with. And this message for the business leaders is not necessarily a message that you can limit to yourselves. This is something that you can take back to your employees. And what I brought with me is, to my right, are booklets and pamphlets of information about affinity fraud, about mutual funds, about variable annuities, and how to report, how not to become one of those investors with Mr. Clark that we talked about at the beginning of my discussion. Now, there may be some people who are here today who have an agricultural background and may hedge their investments through commodities or futures contracts. Well, I have a database for that. It's called the Background Affiliation Status Information Center. So someone comes to you and says to you that they want to give you this wonderful investment in a futures contract. And it's going to net you a 300% return, right? Short period of time. Well, you can go and find out if that person is registered and if they have a background, a negative background in through the CFTC or the National Futures Association. And what's interesting about this is that last Monday, in cooperation with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, there was an arrest made of an individual by the name of Andrew Kelly. I believe it's in the it was in the Deseret. We brought a case against Mr. Kelly also. He did offer a 300% return on futures investments. What he was actually doing was taking the part of the money to support, like my video, his lifestyle. If you go to the complaint, and this is all public information, what you may see, and you'll see it in the Deseret if you look it up, is that he described himself as delusional. a monster and a compulsive liar to his investor. Right? So these are the things that we see at the commission, and this is why it is so important for us to come out to people who are hardworking and who have hardworking individuals working for them and talk about how not to be on the other end of a compulsive liar or a monster. There are other databases, two others. One that is specific to Utah that I just want to bring to your attention. The Utah Division of Securities has its own online database, but we in Utah have first in the nation, and I credit Sean Graves' office for this, first in the nation, Utah White Collar Criminal Registry. So you have the net of broker check, you have the IAPD database, you have the National Futures Association database, the Utah online database, and then at the bottom end, if you're absolutely not sure, check to see if this person's ever been arrested by the state. But what happens if you've gotten past that initial review and now you're actually looking at the investment? So the first part of what I said was, let's take a look at researching the individual. Now let's look at the product. If they're offering a stock, at sec.gov, there is the ability to go in to EDGAR, the EDGAR database, and look and see whether or not there are filings of that particular stock. EDGAR stands for the Electronic Data Gathering, Analysis, and Retrieval Tool. This is all publicly available at sec.gov. If someone is offering a bond or a 529 plan, you can go to EMMA. Now, I'm not quite sure why one's EDGAR, one's an EMMA, but it is the Electronic Municipal Market Access Database, all free databases that are available to allow you to do research on investments. Obviously, if you're investing in mutual funds, you can get information directly from the mutual fund company. And if you have if you're being asked to invest in state-registered investments, you should be able to get some information from the state. So what does that tell you? If someone is coming to you, your colleagues, your employees, and suggesting that you invest or that they invest, you should be able to not only get information about the individual, but you should be able to get information about the product. And if you can't find either one of those, red flags, something's wrong. Doesn't mean you don't invest, but you still need to verify. You can trust, just verify. So let's talk about some of those common red flags. The first one is there's something in your gut that's telling you it sounds too good to be true. If you feel that, go with it, right? And you can call our office, you can call the state, Mr. Woodwell, you can reach out to the AG's office. We talk regularly, so if we see patterns in one part of Utah or another, we're all gonna hear about it. It doesn't matter which office you call. If you hear or receive what you consider to be high pressure sales tactics, you have to invest now. This is about to close soon. That's a question to ask, especially if you can't find the information or you can't find any registration for the individual online. A very common one that I've seen quite a bit is a complete lack of documentation. Investments outside of the United States are fine, but again, I would link it with some type of documentation. You should be able to tie it back to something, because once you move outside of the United States, there may be less regulation surrounding that investment. Unregistered investments are also somewhat of a red flag. It's something that you really want to research as much as possible. And again, the unlicensed sellers. One area that we've seen a lot is unsolicited offers to invest, either through emails, through telephone calls. One of my staff members received a call. I was coming up on the elevator, and the individual said, "Rich, I'm really in trouble." I said, well, tell me about it. What happened? So I got a call from the IRS. I got it on the way to work. I don't know how they got my cell phone number. I said, okay, what happened? And he said, well, they said I had a debt. And I got to go back to my office and call them back and give them my information so I can pay the debt. And I had to explain, that wasn't the IRS. But if you give them your credit card information, your database, your social security number, they will become you very quickly. So there are those phone calls that we all get, offering investments, offering quick opportunities to make money. And we have to ask ourselves, why are we getting that call? Who are you? And can I find you and this investment on any one of those services that the SEC mentioned during the lunch on December 6th? And if I can't, I don't know if I want to invest with you. Another big problem for us, and one that we've seen, is, and this was something that we saw in 2008, 2009, we're not seeing it as much, are phishing related emails. For quite a period, there were, and this was not happening at one firm, this was happening across a number of firms. Individuals at firms would get emails from your email address. So the Rich Best email address. It says, Richard, hi, it's Richard, I'm in Bavaria. I want to buy a chalet. I'm spending money on real estate in Bavaria. Now, I've never been to Germany. I need to liquidate my entire portfolio and send that money. Now, a registered representative, a salesperson, getting the email from my email address, assets, to buy that real estate. So you ask yourself, well, how did they pull that off? Well, that was because I got an email from AOL, Google, Gmail, doesn't matter, saying that I need to verify my information for my email address. And I need to provide other information to verify it. So I gave the phisher my information that allowed them to go to Fidelity, to go to Vanguard, to go to my financial institution and pose as me. And I didn't realize that it happened because I thought I was just verifying the information. Right? So we actually, when I was the FINRA, brought cases against broker-dealers for not doing sufficient checks in that space, but it still did not negate the impact that it had on investors at the time. So that's another important area. And the way to avoid that is if you get those emails in, if you get that requesting for your information, obviously, again, just keep following that one line that I'll say to you over and over again. It's okay to trust, I just got to verify. Okay, so what I would say is when someone does actually come to you with an investment, be skeptical and research, as I said, every aspect. Look to see whether or not the product is registered. If the person is registered with the SEC, FINRA, or the state. And then ask the next question, is this investment, even if they are registered, is it suitable for me? Is it the type of investment that I should place my money in? Is it too risky? And then, now here's one that I think is intuitive, but when I go back to the John Scott Clark example and we kind of walk through discussions on that case, when Mr. Clark attempted to explain that investment in the Iraqi dinar to an individual who was on his side, who was kind of working with him, when he explained it, even that individual said, I don't understand it. So if it doesn't make sense to you, don't invest in it. Doesn't matter how lucrative the return is, you should understand what you're investing in. So let's look at a few of the common schemes that we see in the office. One is a common, what I'll call pump and dump scheme, which is a boiler room scheme. It involves just touting a company's stock, usually a microcap stock, through false and misleading statements into the marketplace. You may get those emails. I certainly get them. The false claims will usually push the price of the stock up. Individuals will invest. They're usually people holding large amounts of the stock, who are the insiders. As the price goes up, they sell. The price drops, everyone else loses. And in many instances, loses their investment because there really wasn't any product associated with the stock. And the way to avoid that type of scam is to really understand the investment and not necessarily invest in something that you don't have a lot of information about. A common scheme has been fraud using false research opinions in online investments. So you may see on certain blogs and otherwise information about medical marijuana stocks. I thought it was pretty interesting that you're going to have someone talk with you about marijuana soon. We brought a case against a medical marijuana company earlier this year related to a manipulation scheme. So there's certain areas that you'll see it, and it involved a certain level of pumping up the stock based upon research. So if you see, whether it's on blogs, on the internet, or otherwise you receive information about, you'll check the source of that information before you invest. The other is high yield investment products. That is the investment that you cannot refuse, that you have to get into really soon, the one that pays very, very high returns. It usually has a lot of risk. So it takes me back to, if it's not suitable for you, if you don't understand the product, it's not something that you should necessarily consider investing in. Nearer to my heart is affinity fraud, because that's the one that I see the most. Affinity fraud is very prevalent here in Utah, and it is not limited to one particular group. The affinity group can be across a number of different areas, right? And that's important for me to say. I think that people think that it is tied to one area. It can be religion, it can be age, it can be national ethnicity, it could be from particular countries. They're just trying to find a common connection to you, your employees, your colleagues, and get you to trust them. I have seen cases across the country where it has been, where the affinity group were in Boston, people from Brazil and the Dominican Republic, and in Miami, people from Haiti. But it's all the same thing. Trust me, I have a similar connection to you, and therefore you should invest. In fact, I brought with me some booklets on specifically how to avoid affinity fraud that you can take a look at. So let's talk about some recent examples of fraud in Utah. One of them is the American Pension Systems case, which APS. Some people here may have heard about that one. We brought a case against APS in 2015. We obtained an asset freeze and appointed a receiver in that case. And what that dealt with was individual retirement accounts, and specifically self-directed individual retirement accounts. And that one impacted me when I first got to the office, because that is people's time that they spent working in their careers and putting aside for retirement. We expended significant resources. One of the things that our office did with the APS case, we're a civil agency, so we don't prosecute criminal cases. We work alongside the U.S. Attorney's Office when it's appropriate. But because of the importance of that case, we allowed one of our trial attorneys to assist the U.S. Attorney's Office in the prosecution of that case. Just because it's important to us when we're dealing with individuals' retirements that we send a message that we will not tolerate securities fraud in any area, but when we're dealing with people's retirements, that is a special place for me. Another important case, because it doesn't have to be retirement accounts, right, was National Note. In 2012, we brought a case against a individual who was offering investments in real estate-backed notes. That the problem was that individual, Wayne Palmer, was also using some of the money for his own purposes, as well as paying back other investors with recent investors, paying previous investors with recent investors' money. That was another successful case that we brought that concluded this year. One that stands out in the affinity fraud area is Roger Bliss. Roger Bliss promised investors a 300% return day trading Apple stock. For anyone who's invested and can think about, of all the stocks that you're going to make a 300% return, it's not going to be Apple stock unless you are really sophisticated. But like the individual in our video, Mr. Bliss was paying new investors with new investor money, and he was living that lifestyle that we saw in the video. What was interesting about Mr. Bliss was that we brought a case in February 2015. I got to the office in July. Heard was that we had a contempt hearing because we believed, after we got an asset freeze, that Mr. Bliss was secreting a boat. And we needed to take action. So one of our trial attorneys went in, and as part of a hearing, Mr. Bliss provided material, and lo and behold, it was determined by the court that Mr. Bliss may have made false statements to the court. We again worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office, in that case in the FBI, and Mr. Bliss pleaded guilty. He's now serving time in state prison. His brother-in-law had participated in the false statements to the court, and we again offered one of our trial attorneys to the U.S. Attorney's Office to help try the case, and his name is Mr. Ford, he was convicted. So I say that to you to say that the U.S. Attorney, that the SEC is a partner to you in business. I said this to Mr. Sutherland when I first spoke with him. You see, the problem is that when these fraudsters take money away from citizens, they're also taking money away from legitimate companies because they don't have the money to spend in legitimate companies or invest with legitimate companies. So it impacts everybody. I think I have about 1 minute left, so I'll take a few moments for questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
I've been very curious about crowdsourcing, and particularly those outfits that are using it to support charities.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're one here, and I'm involved with others. Are you finding that you're running into fraud with the crowdsourcing attempting to help the charity? So, maybe, but it's actually going elsewhere.
That's interesting because when we did the outreach in late October, because of an interest in crowdfunding, we brought out some of the experts nationally, both at the SEC and in the crowdfunding space, to talk about what folks have seen. And we have not seen that much investment through crowdfunding that we thought. And I personally haven't seen cases here in Utah yet.
It seems like we read the $100 million fraud or Ponzi scheme, and then after 2 years, you see the small headline, and he's serving 16 months on a plea deal, and we don't know where the rest of the money is. Why is there sometimes a disconnect between the amount of money that has been lost and the punishment is for the individual who pleads, I'm sorry, I was a good guy, but I did a bad thing.
So that, the plea portion of it would be done by the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I can tell you that what I've seen is that the trial process can take some time. From our perspective, the most useful tool that we can bring to the table is the asset freeze. So when we are aware of a fraud, we can move very quickly. In the one that we that was filed last Monday, 20 days. So 20 days. So we can move very quickly to file a case, freeze the assets, determine where they are, and then go from there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.